Hello everyone, myself CA Mohit Gupta on behalf of CA Sansaar. Today I will be discussing recent amendments in GST. More specifically, we will be covering the amendments made in GST law by Finance Act number 2, 2019. So let us start the topic. So let us first see what is Finance Act and when it came into force. So Finance Act number 2 2019, it received the assent of President on 1st August 2019, and that is the date when it came into force. And in Finance Act, as you all know, there are sections of various tax laws and other laws as well. So section 92 to section 116 were those sections which amended GST law, and these were contained in chapter 4 of Finance Act. So all the provisions did not come into force on same day. अलग अलग provisions अलग अलग date में force में आए हैं. So let us see कौन सा section कब force में आया. So first of all, we have section 113, 115 and 116. These three sections came into force immediately when Finance Act received the assent of President, that is on 1st August. However, they were retrospective amendments. So from the date of GST inception, that is 1st July 2017. So these were basically provided to give retrospective exemption to uranium ore concentrate. Now, next is section 103, which came into force on 1st September by notification number 39/2019. So this provision is related to refund, and it basically provided for single refund disbursement authority under GST. But the main topic which we will be covering today are these sections 93 to 96, 98, 99 and so on, which you must be seeing on the screen. So these are those sections which came into force from 1st January 2020. The date on screen is wrong. The actual date is 1st January 2020. So these are the provisions which we will be discussing in detail today. And there are some other sections also which are not yet notified as date of their applicability. So let us start with section 93. It has made some changes in composition scheme. So CGST Amendment Act 2018, which came into force from 1st February 2019, it provided that composition supplier can provide services up to 10% of turnover or rupees 5 lakh, whichever is higher. So basically earlier composition suppliers were not allowed to provide any services except restaurant services. So this provision was a beneficial provisions which provided some leeway to taxpayer. कि अगर कोई normal business भी कर रहा है but there is a very small portion of turnover of services, then it is also allowed. Now one issue was coming that every person has some interest, either in form of savings or in form of fixed deposits or in other deposits in bank on which he earns interest. And as per GST law, that interest is considered as a supply of service. So even that interest was being counted in that threshold of services. So government amended that, and it said that value of exempt supplies will not include interest portion. Now, another next change in composition scheme was that casual and non-resident taxable persons, they are not eligible to opt for composition scheme. So this condition is there in GST law from the very first day, but earlier this condition was provided in CGST rules. Now they have changed this and they have provided this condition in the CGST Act itself, so as to provide better legal backing to this provision. Now, next provision also in composition scheme, all the service providers, as I told you earlier, they are not eligible for composition scheme. So the industry made a representation and government allowed a special composition scheme for service providers wherein they could be taxed at the rate of 6% if their turnover is up to 50 lakh and subject to other conditions which are prescribed in the law. So this was notified with effect from 1st April 2019. But this change was made by way of a rate notification, not in section 10, which deals with composition scheme. So to provide a better legal backing, these provisions are now incorporated in CGST Act itself. Now moving on to next amendment in composition scheme. I would not say that it is an amendment. It is added by way of an explanation. So it is merely a clarification. So I will be explaining this by help of an illustration. So as you can see on your screens, let's say from 1st April, I started my business, and up to 1st September, my turnover was 20 lakh. And I supply both goods as well as services. So my registration threshold is 20 lakhs. So on 1st September, I became liable for registration and I took GST registration. Then up to 1st March, my turnover is 1st September to 1st March, 1.3 crores. So the GST law clarifies that 20 lakhs plus 1.3 CR total comes to 1.5 CR. So GST law now clarifies that the turnover of 20 lakhs, the turnover before the date on which taxpayer became liable to registration, this will be included when we calculate the total aggregate value for composition eligibility. For example, composition scheme की actual limit is 1.5 CR. So as on 1st March, total turnover has exceeded 1.5 CR. So उसके लिए मैं 20 lakhs को भी include करूंगा और मैं 1.3 CR को भी include करूंगा. Totaling them both on 1st March, 1.5 CR turnover reached. So from 1st March, I have to opt out of composition scheme. But they have also clarified that tax is payable only on 1.3 CR. That is, जिस दिन टैक्स पेयर लाइबल टू बिकम रजिस्ट्रेशन हुआ, उस दिन के बाद वाले टर्नओवर पर ही कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम में टैक्स पे करना होगा. बट उससे पहले का टर्नओवर कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम की एलिजिबिलिटी के लिए कैलकुलेट होगा. So this was the basic clarification, and this is the concept from day one itself. It is merely a clarification. Also, they have said that interest, which we talked about earlier, will not be included for both the things, either for the payment of tax or for calculation of eligibility. So let's say even if I have interest of 10 lakh, मैं उस पर टैक्स भी पे नहीं करूंगा और उसे मैं 1.5 CR की लिमिट के लिए भी इंक्लूड नहीं करूंगा. Okay, so moving on to next amendment, it is done in section 94. It deals with registration. So basically, the normal registration limit in GST law is 20 lakh. When I reach the threshold of 20 lakhs of turnover, aggregate turnover, then I have to take registration. But this limit was extended to 40 lakh for those persons who were engaged exclusively in supply of goods with effect from 1st April 2019. But again, this was provided through a notification which was issued under section 23. So now they have provided proper legal backing to this provision by incorporating it in section 22. Another change in the notification which was earlier issued, they said that the person who is exclusively engaged in supply of goods. So suppose I am a trader, I am engaged wholly in supply of goods, but मेरी कुछ interest income है. So in GST that is treated as supply of services. And as soon as I supply services, I become ineligible for the higher threshold of 40 lakhs. So they have also clarified that if you have interest income and no other services, then also you will be eligible for higher threshold of 40 lakhs. Now, next amendment is the requirement of Aadhar number. So this amendment is basically on the lines of change which the government did in Income Tax Act also for allotment of PAN. So as per this provision, every registered person, that is a person who is registered as on date under GST, he has to furnish Aadhar in prescribed manner, Aadhar number in prescribed manner. In case of failure, the registration of that person will be deemed invalid. However, no date has been prescribed as of now for this provision. Similarly, they have also said that the date, notified date, from that date, all the person who are taking new registration under GST, they also have to provide Aadhar number. Now, in case of persons other than individual, because अगर कोई individual GST में registration ले रहा है, so he will provide his own Aadhar number. But in case of other than individual, let's say a partnership firm, HUF, company, society. So in all those cases, they have said that Aadhar number of Karta or managing director, whole-time director, partners, etc. Basically the governing body. So Aadhar number of those persons will be required. And they have provided that if Aadhaar is not assigned to that person, that is, that person does not have Aadhaar, then there is no requirement to furnish Aadhaar number. In that case, alternate means of identification, some other manner will be provided to verify such persons. However, this provision is not notified as on date that from when it will be applicable. The government has just provided it in act, so government has the power now. They can notify it on any date on when they want. Also, they have said that they can provide exceptions to this provision to specified persons. Now, this will be a very interesting area to see because recently Gujarat High Court also pronounced a judgment that linking Aadhaar with PAN is also not mandatory because validity of Aadhaar Act itself is in challenge before larger bench of Supreme Court. So unless and until the judgment of that larger bench comes, the government cannot make Aadhaar linking mandatory. So if and when government notifies this provision in GST Act also, so we have to see implication of that judgment on this section also and see whether it is mandatory or not. Now, next section, it is related to e-payment. So basically, they have inserted a new section in CGST Act, section 31A, in which they have said that the government can prescribe a certain class of persons who would be required to provide prescribed mode of payments, of electronic payments to their recipients, and it will be subject to prescribed conditions, obviously. सो बेसिकली इस प्रोविजन से मतलब क्या है, लेट से गवर्नमेंट नोटिफाई करती है 100 सीआर से अबव, आई एम जस्ट टेकिंग एन एग्जांपल. सो लेट से गवर्नमेंट नोटिफाइड कि 100 सीआर से अबव जितने भी कंपनीज हैं वो अपने रेसिपिएंट को प्रिस्क्राइब्ड मोड देंगी कि वो ई पेमेंट के लिए एलिजिबल है. सो एवरी कंपनी whose turnover is above 100 crores, it has to mandatorily provide option to the recipient that if you want to pay through electronic means, then you can pay me through electronic means. However, it will only be an option. If the recipient wants to pay through some other mode, then recipient would be open for it. The obligation is only on the end of supplier to provide an option. Now, moving on to next change, it is wide section 98 and 111. So it is basically related to annual return. So the provisions of annual return are given in section 44, and section 44 does not provide any power to central government to extend the date of annual return. So the date is prescribed as 31st December of next financial year. So if I talk about financial year 1920, the due date will be 31st December 2020. Now, as we all know, the date of annual return of financial year 17-18 has been extended several times by the government due to practical difficulties. So those changes, those extensions were done by removal of difficulty orders because the government did not have ordinary power. So removal of difficulty order is an extraordinary provision which they exercise to extend the due date. But this is a temporary provision in GST law which will go away in a few months time. So to give itself a permanent power for extension, government prescribed this change in section 44, by which now they can wide a notification, they can now extend the due date of annual return. Now, next change is in section 99. It is in section 49, and it was a much awaited measure and in much demand by the industry. So ये सारी प्रॉब्लम्स आप सबने फेस की होंगी कि लेट से आपको सीजीएसटी के हेड में पेमेंट करनी थी बट आपने आईजीएसटी के हेड में कर दिया. आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट कैश पेमेंट जो आप चालान से पेमेंट करते हैं, या सीजीएसटी में आपको टैक्स के हेड में पेमेंट करनी थी बट आपने इंटरेस्ट के हेड में पेमेंट कर दी. So us case mein the present solution is to pay again that amount in correct head and then claim refund of the amount paid in incorrect head, which was creating very practical difficulties for the taxpayer. So now they have provided that a registered person, can transfer any amount from any head or any subhead to another head or subhead. So if I have suppose wrongly deposited tax in CGST interest subhead, but I wanted to do in CGST tax. So I can transfer the amount from interest subhead to tax subhead. Or if I deposited wrongly in SGST head, but I wanted to do in CDST, so I can transfer that also. But this will be subject to prescribed condition, obviously. And such transfer from one head to another will be deemed as a refund from that head. So if I transfer from SGST to CDST, it will be deemed as a refund from SGST ledger. And also the respective adjustments will be made between governments. So if I transfer amount from SGST ledger to CDST cash ledger, the state government will provide such amount to central government. However, this provision is not yet operational on GST portal. So we have to see when this provision actually becomes available on portal, because unless and until such option is available, this provision is of no practical use for the taxpayers. So let's wait and see कब तक वो option portal पे available होता है. Now next again is a power of extension in returns, but this time for e-commerce operator. So earlier e-commerce operator has to file two returns basically. They have to file GSTR 8 on a monthly basis and GSTR 9B on a annual basis. And both the provisions were given in section 52 subsection 4 and subsection 5, in which government had no power to extend the due date. So they had to resort to again removal of difficulty order to extend dates whenever required. Now they have taken such power by amending those sections, and now via a simple notification they can extend such date. Now one of the most important change is change in anti-profiteering provisions. So in anti-profiteering, they have provided that in case it is held by authority, the concerned authority, that a person has actually profiteered some amount, then apart from such amount and interest, it also has to pay penalty of 10% of such amount. So let's assume I have profiteered some amount of rupees 100, then I have to pay penalty of rupees 10 along with such tax amount also, profiteered amount. But if I pay such amount within 30 days from order of authority, then the penalty will be waived off. So this provision is basically provided to reduce litigation so that the taxpayer can settle the matter as soon as they get the order and they don't go into further litigation. Also, they have clarified the meaning of word profiteered. So this is provided by way of an explanation. So it is merely a clarification. So they have said that profiteered, the term profiteered means the amount of benefit either by way of availability of ITC or reduction in tax rate. The amount, such amount which is not passed on to recipient would be by way of reduction in output prices would be the profiteered amount. So what does it mean exactly? So suppose I am selling some goods at 100 rupees, 100 plus GST. So GST rate is 12. Then subsequently government changes such rate to 5. So earlier I was selling at 100 plus 12, 112. Now I have to sell, I should sell the goods at 100 plus 5, 105. But if I keep selling those goods at 112, then I am profiteering an amount of rupees 7, which I have to refund back either to consumer, and if it is not possible, then to consumer welfare fund. So this is the meaning they have clarified as regard the terms profiteer. So these are all the amendments which was applicable from 1st January 2020, and hope that you all got clarity on what all those amendment means.